One of the core aspects of the ARIA system is its collection of roles. As we learned in lessons 3 and 4, a role in accessibility term amounts to a shorthand for a particular UI pattern. ARIA provides a vocabulary of patterns we can use via the role attribute on any HTML element. When we applied role equals checkbox in the example earlier, we were telling assistive technology that the element should follow the checkbox pattern. We're promising that it will have a checked state, either checked or not checked, and that the state may be toggled using the mouse or via the spacebar. If we follow the advice in earlier lessons, we've already kept part of that promise by implementing keyboard behaviors. In fact, since the keyboard interactions feature so prominently, it's very important to make sure that when creating a custom widget, the role attribute is always applied in the same place as the tab index attribute, so that keyboard events will go to the right place, and so that when page focus lands on an element, its role is conveyed accurately. The ARIA spec describes a taxonomy of possible values for the role attribute and associated ARIA attributes which may legally be used in conjunction with those roles. This is the best source of truth when it comes to understanding how the ARIA roles and attributes all work together and may be used in a way that is supported by browsers and assistive technologies. It's well worth browsing through the list of roles linked from the instructor notes, since there's a finite vocabulary of roles which can be used, and each one has specific semantic implications. Also, in this screenshot, we can see that certain roles are designated as abstract. These capture certain properties which may be common to several roles, but may not be used as values for the role attribute. The ARIA spec also has a section on each role, explaining its semantic meaning, as well as any associated attributes that may or may not be used with it. Let's walk through these sections. The top section gives you the name of the role, a brief description of its semantic meaning, as well as a brief description of the related radio group role. Then in the table, we start off with a superclass role. The roles model includes a taxonomy of roles, including some abstract roles, which capture groups of roles with common properties but can't be used on their own. In this case, the superclass roles are option and checkbox, so radio button inherits properties from both of those. We also have a related concept. This is just kind of a catch-all for things that are semantically related. In this case, a radio input is related because it's a common presentation of a radio button. These inherited states and properties are all the properties which may or must be applied to this element based on its superclass roles. Most of these will be optional, generic, global attributes, but in this case we see ARIA checked, which is inherited from the checkbox role, is a required attribute. So if we're going to create an ARIA radio button, we have to make sure ARIA checked is set correctly. We have some information about labels referred to as name here. Name from indicates whether the name may be taken from the element's text content, like a button element, or needs to be provided via some other mechanism, like a native HTML radio input. Having contents as one of the options here indicates that the element's text content, if it has any, will be used as its accessible label. Author indicates that the author must explicitly provide a name, which we'll cover a bit later in this lesson. Accessible name required, obviously, indicates you've got to specify some type of name for this role. This is usually, but not always, true. For example, the main role indicates the main region of a page, which requires no explanation in most cases. And finally, the implicit value note here indicates the default value for ARIA checked is false. This means that if we omit the ARIA checked attribute, the radio button will be represented as being unselected. It's definitely worth learning to navigate the ARIA spec to find out about the specifics of ARIA role states and properties. But if you can find the specific pattern you want in the ARIA practices guide, then that gives you all the information you need to implement the widget in one place. It also links back to the ARIA spec for information on all of the ARIA attributes it mentioned. Earlier, we saw the 1.0 version of this document. This is the 1.1 version, which at the time I'm recording this is a working draft. I'm working off this version in this lesson since it's more up to date, and will eventually become the standard version. This is the design pattern we already saw for Radio Group, which gives us the keyboard interaction and also some more detailed advice on the ARIA attributes which should be used. The design pattern tells us that we need to put our radio buttons in a container element with a role of radio group, give each one a role of radio, and ensure that we set ARIA checked correctly. So let's try that out.